So again, the diaphragm is a sheet of muscle, fascia, with a hole in it that's attached to the bottom of the ribs, the bottom of the sternum, and the front of the spine. When it's relaxed, it's shaped like a dome or a parachute, right? And let's just say this is my sternum and this is my spine. And when it contracts, the muscle fibers of the diaphragm shorten. That's what muscle fibers do when they do work. They shorten, okay? And when they shorten in the diaphragm, let me actually say this. When they shorten, let's say you have a muscle attached here and a muscle attached here. When that muscle shortens, it does the work. That's where the work is in the contraction. So when the diaphragm contracts, the muscle fibers shorten and the diaphragm flattens. It goes from being shaped like a parachute to being shaped like a drum head. And when that happens, it pushes down on the contents of the abdomen. And because they can only go so far before they bump or smush into the pelvic floor, they squish outward, like an exercise ball would squish if you were to sit on it. Now simultaneously, the flattening of the diaphragm enlarges the chest cavity. So when the diaphragm contracts and flattens, the chest cavity gets larger in volume by about this much, right? Now that increased volume drops the pressure in the chest cavity. It creates a negative pressure or a vacuum. And that negative pressure from the increased volume is the reason air comes into the chest from the external environment. Now that same vacuum, interestingly enough, is also what brings fluid back from your arms, legs, and head. So the blood that's in your veins, lymphatic fluid, sinus drainage even, all those fluids return towards your chest cavity every time you inhale. So the diaphragm, the thoracic diaphragm, has a circulatory function, right? In fact, the diaphragm is, as I learned from Dr. Lossing in a visceral manipulation seminar, the diaphragm is actually the primary mover of fluid in the body, which is a shocking and a startling and awesome thing to contemplate. The primary mover of fluid, as I understand it, it's like 2/3 to 3/4 of the fluid drive of the body. That is, like I said, a startling thing for most of us to consider because we don't think of it that way. We think it's the heart that does the work of moving fluid in the body. But if you look at a picture of the diaphragm, if you take a look at the picture we'll show here, you can see that the stroke volume of the diaphragm is actually massive relative to the heart itself. My guess is, and I'm not exactly sure of this, but my guess is you could probably take 2 hearts, whole hearts, and put them inside the stroke volume of the diaphragm, right? So the diaphragm, the stroke volume of the diaphragm actually dwarfs the size of the heart, much even more so the size of the chambers of the heart, which is the stroke volume of the heart. So it makes sense that the diaphragm is the primary mover of fluid in the body. And this is also an awesome thing for all of us to contemplate because the diaphragm is a skeletal muscle. That makes me want to do a little dance right here on this table. The diaphragm is a skeletal muscle. That means it is amenable to our conscious control. You can't go to your heart and say, would you just pick it up a little bit or slow it down? You can't just do that and have it respond. You can do things to influence it, run, try to take some breaths to calm down. You can do something, try to influence it, scare yourself, but you can't just go to it, or at least most of us can't. There are probably some very highly accomplished yogis somewhere, not here, who can just do that. And so, but all of us have access to our thoracic diaphragm, right? Or almost all of us. You know, you have to. Basically, all of us have access to our thoracic diaphragm. So that's a wonderful thing because better fluid motion, most particularly better fluid return, is better physiology. There's an absolutely direct relationship between the benefit of good fluid return to the benefit of your physiology. So I do want to take a minute to talk about that, but I'm gonna first describe what happens when the diaphragm relaxes. So again, we've shortened our fibers, we've flattened the diaphragm so it's shaped like a drum head now. We've smushed the abdominal contents, we've enlarged the chest cavity, we've created a vacuum that's moving air and fluid. And then when it's time for the diaphragm to relax, the muscle fibers elongate. They get longer, and as a result, the internal organs, it's going to dome back up like a parachute again. And when it does, the internal organs are going to rise up underneath it like little skydivers. And the chest cavity will get smaller, and air will go out. Technically speaking, air is going to get sucked out of this high pressure area into the relative negative pressure of the external environment. So the point that I really want to make, and I know Piper really wanted me to make this point, is that you don't have to work to exhale. All you have to do is relax those fibers so that the diaphragm can dome back up like a parachute, which will occupy the chest cavity, will invade and occupy the chest cavity and make it small in size. So all you have to do really is relax this muscle to let air out. In fact, I'm guessing maybe as much as 90 or even more, probably 90% of breathing, something like that, is actually relaxation and allowing. There's really only a small amount of breathing that has to be work. Because if you think about it, if a person's taking really nice deep breaths, the inhalation phase of breathing is relatively small. It's probably only about a third or a quarter. I should give you real stats on this, but it's about a third or a quarter of the breath cycle. And that's the only time you have to work, right? Is when this contracts and flattens. Now, all the other muscles of the body wall, the accessory muscles of respiration, if you know what I'm talking about, like the scalenes and the muscles in between your ribs and your abdominal muscles and trapezius and all these other muscles that we call accessory muscles of breathing because they can contribute to breathing. All they really need to do in order for you to get your best breath is to maintain a soft, supple, surrendered responsiveness to the will of the thoracic diaphragm. They need to elongate when the diaphragm puts pressure into them, and they need to spring back when the diaphragm relaxes and relieves that pressure. So I would argue that actually tension that you hold in the body wall actually interferes with your ability to get a good breath. But they do need to all maintain a soft, supple, surrendered responsiveness to the will of the diaphragm. So, and we'll see more about that when we actually lie down and start breathing.